Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Cloud Security Alliance Delaware Valley Chapter's Fireside Chat with Richard Stiennon. My name is Rob Wilner, Chapter President. I am sharing an excerpt from an article I read on LinkedIn that Mr. Stiennon wrote and published in Forbes.com on August 4th, 2020. Practitioners must understand cloud architectures and how to defend them. The Cloud Security Alliance, formed to promote best practices in cloud deployments, is still highly relevant. Its subchapters around the world are valuable forums for security practitioners to meet and learn about these best practices. Cloud Security Architects is a perfectly legitimate title, unquote. Finally, CSA and its subchapters were getting the recognition it deserves in the business community. And I couldn't thank Mr. Stiennon enough in response to the post. As a result, he accepted my invitation to join us today, and as stated on the invitation, Mr. Stiennon has generously donated 50 of his Security Yearbook 2020 books to the CSA Delaware Valley chapter for the first 50 registered attendees of this event. All those in attendance will receive a hard copy of the book. Before we get started, I would like to say a few words about CSA-DV and some housekeeping in regards to your participation in today's fireside chat. The CSA-DV chapter, led by a volunteer group of local cloud and cybersecurity professionals, is the go-to resource for industry practitioners to learn and maintain their cloud security best practices knowledge, as well as for any individual in the local community interested in cloud security awareness. CSA-DV offers events, webinars, and training, as well as charitable programs, including training programs for people financially challenged as a result of this pandemic. I would like to encourage our audience to submit questions in the chat room throughout the interview. At approximately 8:15 p.m., CSA-DV's Oversight Committee Chair and Study Group Leader, Kathy LaJoy Malik, will field your questions and ask them on your behalf. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to take this time to introduce you to our Fireside Chat interviewer, Mike Jordan, will take the honors of introducing and interviewing Mr. Stiennon. Mike had previously served as CSA-DV's Vice President and is still a contributing force behind our board of directors and the growth of our chapter. You will know that Mike is a publicly recognized cybersecurity and risk management expert and executive specializing in third-party risk management. He has taught at the world-renowned RSA conference, has contributed to industry research, and has quoted in the news media on cybersecurity, technology risk, and the future of technology. Mike has provided leadership and guidance for multiple industry groups and has been an advisor for third-party risk management software and services companies. He is also a GIAC board member and was a founding member of the Delaware ISC Squared chapter. Okay, Mike, take it away.
Rob, it's my absolute honor to be here and able to interview our esteemed guest, Richard Stiennon. Richard Stiennon is an industry analyst and advisor to many security companies, from startup to the very largest. He's been writing and speaking about cybersecurity since 1995. He's the author of 7 books on cybersecurity, including Secure Cloud Transformation, The CIO's Journey. Richard's presented on cybersecurity topics in 31 countries on 6 continents. He was Chief Marketing Officer for Fortinet and Vice President of Threat Research at WebRoot Software. Prior to that, he was Vice President of Research at Gartner. He writes the cyber domain column for Forbes.com and is frequently quoted as a cybersecurity expert in mainstream media. He's also the executive editor of SecurityCurrent.com and the senior fellow at the International Cybersecurity Dialogue. He's one of the most followed security industry analysts, and you can follow him on Twitter at Cyberwar. Please welcome our honored guest, Richard Stiennon.
Thank you very much, Mike. That was a more than generous introduction, and this is going to be a fun night, and I love your fire.
Oh, absolutely. It wouldn't be a very good fireside chat without it, now would it?
No, it wouldn't.
Well, thanks. Let's think of the topic we're doing today, cloud security. We're talking about it, but let's start off a little bit further past the clouds. I understand you have a background in aerospace engineering.
Correct.
Space was the final frontier for so long, and it seems like people may have lost interest in space exploration for some time, but that might have changed recently with some of the new innovations and the nascent commercial market in space. So as a former industry analyst, do you see any patterns in the very early market for commerce in the space beyond the clouds? Any predictions on what will happen in the aerospace field economically over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I do. I've been thinking about space since I was 12 years old when I decided that's what I wanted to do. And I got sucked into what we thought at the time was just the reality, right? NASA had plans for a permanent manned base on the moon by 1984. When I was in college, I was going to graduate in 82, so I'd be all set to suit up and go to the moon. By the time I graduated, all the engineering was done on the space shuttle. There were no rocket programs in the United States other than the Titan missile in production, but the design was done there. So I had to go to the automotive world and practice as a structural engineer. But I think that the interest in space has never waned. As a matter of fact, there was a whole generation of people like me that just got, totally sold. This is the new reality. We're going to do it. And we were a little bit let down because the space program was completely artificially motivated, right? It was a space race between two battling nations in the Cold War. So there's just nothing to get us there. But now we're entering the phase that it always should have been. And if you look, I'm in Michigan. I spent a lot of time in the automotive industry. In the first decade of the 1900s, there were 100 automotive companies. So in like most industries, there has to be that early explosion. And then there's mergers and acquisitions and failures. And, a couple giants come out of it that can command the resources. There are now 100 startup rocket companies. Most of people on the call probably can name Blue Origin from Amazon's Jeff Bezos, and of course SpaceX. There's 98 other companies all building rockets and test firing them now. And I can spend an entire weekend just watching rocket launches. It's so cool. So yeah, thanks for the memories.
Oh, absolutely. I think that it opens up the kid inside of all of us to think of it, what can be out there and such, and just the fact that it's getting there is it's a pretty exciting time to be in.
Yeah, it's fun times. And, now that it only took 2 decades to watch the entire security industry grow to what it is today, from a handful of firewall vendors, basically, to a couple of IDS vendors and antivirus vendors in the early 2000s, to over 3,000 vendors today, all with standalone products that they engineer and attempt to take to market.
It's got to be a fairly challenging market out there. In a recent article, actually, you've written a few articles about the stalwarts of the security industry. One thing I've noticed is you've got a little bit of pessimism about their chances in many cases. Some of the older organizations started off in a certain mode, and now in this world of cloud security, there's a lot of changes happening. Some of them have been failing recently. Some of the biggest names.
Yep.
And
yep.
I have a quote from you here. It says, "No major security vendor has ever succeeded in pivoting to a new model fast enough to succeed." It's a pretty bold statement. And given your analyst background, what advice do you have for security vendors looking for viability in a cloud-driven world?
Yeah, it just like the enterprise who, spent the last 2 decades building a data center and pushing out a corporate network to all their remote offices, they are all challenged that way, and they have to move to the cloud, right? They've got to use the internet for connectivity, get rid of those silly MPLS expensive circuits for their corporate network, and ultimately get rid of their data centers. and just move to the cloud. I mean, I know the cloud's just another data center, but it's a lot easier to manage than your own data center. And somebody else is making the decisions on what kind of processor to use, et cetera. So security vendors are as slow as their customers to adapt to change, right? They do keep the eye on the market. They keep their eye very closely on what their competitors are doing and saying. And unfortunately, you know, some of them, security isn't the biggest thing they do, right? So if you think of, well, let's say Broadcom right now, you know, it's easy to pick on them because who even knows how they stay alive, but they've got, you know, thousands of employees in the Symantec group and in the CA group and in the original Broadcom part. But they're not going to double down and be the leader in any part of security. And I could say the same things about, well, let's say Cisco, right? Because I've watched Cisco try this over and over and over. They've probably acquired 200 companies. Sometimes they'll acquire a big one that changes the culture inside the company, but it's only for, I don't know, 20% of their employees. Everybody else is selling switches and telephones, right? So they can't really have that change from the bottom up that's led by a security founder. Now, mind you, the ones that do have the original founders leading them tend to pivot faster. So Checkpoint Software, still led by Gil Shwed. Zscaler's fairly new company, but it's obviously led by its founder, Jay Chaudhry. Fortinet, led by its founders, Michael and Ken Z. So they have the ability to really get in the weeds and see what the future is because they did it once before, right? So in the case of Fortinet, right, they said, oh my gosh, the future is replicating what we have in the data center and putting it in the remote office, right? UTM. And I don't actually give Palo Alto much credit for inventing anything, right? They just say, hey, we can do that too. That's exactly what they did. Checkpoint actually stumbled once, right? Because Checkpoint, invented the stateful firewall, and they basically gave up more than half the market to Cisco's PIX, now ASA. I think it's got a new name now. Checkpoint could have held on to that, right? If only they had an appliance, but they were looking at the Microsoft versus Apple model, and Microsoft won that battle early on with going, software on anybody's hardware. Apple said, no, we're going to go on our hardware because we want to control everything. Obviously, and that is what appliance vendors do, right? We got to control the hardware because it's all about feeds and speeds. So I criticized Gil Shwed in an open letter to the CEO of Checkpoint. Got a lot of attention, including getting me hired at Fortinet for writing that letter. And after talking to Gil recently, to interview him for the book, I realized, I might owe him an apology because all these years later, if you're already just software, it's a lot easier to transition to the cloud. Now, mind you, there's other issues, right? The cloud is totally different from a scale perspective. I'm a firm believer it's got the new products have to be cloud native. You can't take something you've invested tens and tens of millions of dollars into to create your appliance and just rip the software out of it, put it in a VM and host it in the cloud, hoping that it's in front of your cloud assets and make it work. It's just not going to work, and it won't be cost effective unless you reduce the licensing down to what it should be. To a real cloud native company is going to do that. They'll go, hey, $500 a month, done. You're not going to get a big vendor that sells $100,000 boxes to do that. So that's why I challenge these guys. What they can do is acquire the companies that do really well in the cloud, right? So that there's definitely going to be lots of acquisitions, but most of them are fairly small, right? You can't. There's no giant to merge with and then own the cloud security world. So they all have to be technology and people hire, and then they have to change the culture of the acquirer, and that just rarely happens.
I see. Yeah, it's an interesting perspective that the Gil in particular, I think, must have over the market today. Just being in security for the time that he was one of the, I guess he kind of made the first firewall, didn't he?
The first commercially successful firewall. How about that?
Yeah. Okay.
And the first go public. Because when Gil came along, we had the TIS Gauntlet, and I think Sidewinder was there already. And then I also interviewed Chris Blask, who helped invent the firewall at Borderware, and they simultaneously invented network address translation with about the same time three other companies did. So yeah, just like in reusable rockets right now, right? Everybody just took advantage of new technology. I won't get into it, but it's my theory that it's the iPhone that made rockets possible. They took advantage of a change in the technology perspective at the time, and they just went with it and created new companies. Just like right now, the opportunity is to recognize that everything's going to be in the cloud, and everybody's going to get to the cloud with their personal devices. So just have solutions for that. And that gives rise to all the ZTNA and the cloud access providers they're all killing it. They're growing fast because it's so easy to deploy and make happen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Well, one of the differences in cloud security is today, to some extent, there's no network perimeter. And that idea is very different than your traditional firewall perimeter that most folks are used to. And well, you got to interview quite a few people, including Gil. I'm sticking with Gil a little bit here because he kind of was there from the beginning. I'm just curious from the perspective of your interview with him. What did you learn from him in his perspective at how he saw technology change over the years, where he started off in this, the leading edge for firewalling, and now is at a point of transition where he almost has to figure out where does his company fit in all of this.
Yeah, I didn't want him to get a chance to pitch their current plans, so I didn't ask him specifically. But I can see where he's going, right? Because Gil's always been a believer in ecosystems and invented one of the first marketplaces for add-on security products to a big security vendor. So I imagine that that's the direction he's going to go. And he's lucky in that he's sitting right in the center of the hotbed of cloud security startups, right? There's for every between cloud security and IoT security, probably 4/5 of the startups have their roots in Israel. So he gets to see all those, right? And it'll be very, very easy for him to acquire one or more when he needs to.
Makes sense. Yeah, the cloud security market. You wrote a piece on Forbes entitled "There is no cloud security market segment." Now, on the surface, that's a pretty bold statement, I think, considering all the companies that call themselves things like cloud access security brokers and such.
Yep.
What exactly did you mean by that statement?
Yeah, so like many bold statements that analysts make, you back into the definitions and then you go, oh yeah, of course, it's obvious now. But I was in the book that a bunch of the registrants are going to get, I pulled together a list of 2,336 vendors. And as I was pulling it together, you try going to 2,300 websites and determining what each of those companies do, right? At least half refuse to say what they do, right? It's always holistic machine learning applied to today's problems for risk management. They never just come out and say, hey, we take your the old spreadsheet you used to use and we host it in AWS. But as I went through, they'd have pictures of clouds on their website, and they'd be cloud. I go, okay, cloud security, that's their major category. Move on. But then I went back to rationalize my categories last summer, and I went, wait a minute, these guys are network security in the cloud. And these guys, they're protecting VMs and Kubernetes. That's endpoint security. These guys are, checking to make sure your policies are in place. That's GRC in the cloud. These guys are doing encrypted volumes in the cloud. That's data security. By the time I was done, cloud security didn't have its own market category. And, which should feel right to everybody on the call because, cloud is the new IT infrastructure. So we're not going to get rid of everything and use brand new stuff. We're going to apply what we used to do to the new, just a new model of doing so. You still need endpoints, still need data, still need network security. All those things are still there. We just have to do them cloud natively now.
So it sounds like if somebody's still struggling with the differences in what's happening in cloud security and what they're probably used to and on premise, there's an analog somewhere in their environment to the technology that's equivalent over there. And I think when you look at a few of the, I guess, models that are coming around recently from a cloud perspective, a great example, the Gartner's SASE model,
yep.
Secure Access Service Edge, that leans into the differences kind of between the old model and the new model, even if you're doing kind of the same things. But it really does put together a treatise that the old ways of doing network security and design, they can't survive
yep.
in the cloud-enabled future. So
yeah.
What do you think are some of the most important differences that people should be aware of in order to prepare for today's shifting needs?
Yeah, they, number one, just like the guys in, the computing function that work with the data centers and storage and all the rest, you have to realize that you no longer get to spec out the hardware. And that, for a lot of geeks like us, that's always been the fun part, right? Oh, I need 4 processors and, I need all these cooling systems, and that's the fun stuff.
That's IT.
That's IT. You just got to break yourself of that, right? And it's difficult. I know took me forever, and I'm, I could never be a cloud architect because I just can't abstract to that many levels like cloud architects have to. So you get over that. But I was interviewing somebody for the cloud security book, and he said, no, this is great. This is standardization. Standardization's always been a tenet of good security practices, right? So you don't have to have separate policies for every single platform. You just have one platform. And unfortunately, back in my day in 2003 or so, the thing for the CIO to do was say, we're going to standardize. Therefore, we're all using Windows 95. So they standardized on the wrong thing, thinking that would be easier. And that was one case where standardization was not good, right? Because it created this complete ecosystem of all the same vulnerable systems. So, but standardization today is, pick one of 3 or 4 major OSs. You don't get to pick an old version. You got to pick the current version. So you started off in pretty good shape already. And of course, on the marketplaces, you can get enhanced versions of those that have been beefed up a little bit with the configurations that you should be doing anyways. And then you pick size of processor, which in my experience is always the biggest you can possibly buy. Otherwise, it'll crash continuously because for some reason, a small a microservice on EC2 can't handle a static website. I don't know why that is. And it only costs $80 a month. I'm talking from personal experience here. But at any rate, that standardization means you're working with something very consistent, and you architect all of your software, all your applications, your database services, everything else to run on that. Boom. A whole layer of things you don't have to worry about anymore. So you can worry about the configuration, the access controls, and ultimately the security of how you do it. So so to me, that's the biggest difference. For most organizations, the hardest lift is getting developers to think that way. And frankly, the old network engineers that came from the telecom world, right? Because most of their budget is spent on these MPLS circuits around the world. So they commanded this huge portion of the IT budget. And that budget's being pilfered by the guys who are saying, get rid of it. We're going to move to the cloud. And moving from, point to point, connecting points of presence and worrying about Sonnet or whatever, underlying protocols you're running on and dragging fiber and all that stuff, that expertise isn't going to be needed by the enterprise anymore. Certainly needed by Google and Microsoft and Amazon. Those guys aren't going to be out of work. But the guys that we need are the ones that can, configure what everything looks like between the VPCs, between the clouds, between the cloud geolocations, and get everything to work smoothly. It's exciting times.
Absolutely. I'll shift gears a little bit here to broader cybersecurity. I'll take a lesson from the late, great James Lipton. He had a couple questions that he always liked to ask his guests. I'm going to ask one of those, maybe two of them for you with the bend on security. So what is your favorite word in cybersecurity?
I think I just saw it yesterday, just because it made me laugh out loud. So it was a report, our government just indicted 6 GRU officers, right? Turns out that in the UK, they're claiming total credit for uncovering them and everything else too. And their lead off in the Times article was that British cybersecurity agents corralled these guys. So my favorite term right now is cybersecurity agent.
Very nice.
Yep.
What is your least favorite word in cybersecurity? I got to think, as an analyst, you got a few of them.
Yeah, I do. So for years and years, it was holistic. At Gartner, we had an inside joke when they said holistic, just replace the word with imaginary, because it didn't exist yet. But I have to say, it's now blockchain. Just bugs me to no end to hear people throw blockchain around. And not to say that blockchain isn't miraculous and an awesome, awesome invention and going to change the world and all the rest, but please don't talk about blockchain and security in the same breath.
Very nice. So in your most recent book, Curmudgeon, you wrote about your time as a Gartner analyst. It was fascinating, I got to say, and especially when you went into detail about all the things that an analyst would do and throughout the year. You had projects that you had to work on consistently throughout the whole year, and you still needed to book hours every day for customer calls.
Yep.
What did you take away most from your experience as an analyst, and did any of that translate to your career as an author?
It did, especially since frankly, for now, the author career supports the analyst career, right? Because I'm still an independent industry analyst, and you've got to have books out there, right, to get people to bring you in for speaking events and sales kickoff meetings for vendors. Well, what I took away from Gartner was, one, I discovered what I like to do, which by the time I was 50, you would think I would know that, but I didn't. I thought I wanted to be Steve Jobs, or actually Elon Musk is who I wanted to be. But it took me a while to realize that I spend so much time going down rabbit holes and researching things that being an industry analyst just channels my natural predilections. So I figured that out. Took a while. I also learned that I do like to write, which was kind of interesting because an aerospace engineer, you go to school, you take a single class in Great Books 101, and you kind of look down your nose at your English major friends because they all want to be Hemingway, and I go, who's that, kind of thing. But I discovered that what I really like to do is write. So an analyst is a great place to do writing, even though it's purely nonfiction, but you do have your own voice. And I discovered at Gartner, because they had such a slew of editors, the editor's goal was to take everybody's voice and make it sound the same. And that, once you think of yourself as a writer, that's really annoying, because you want to be able to see your own writing and recognize it as you and get your voice out there. So that's why I felt eventually that I had to be independent. And that's how I got where I am.
Very nice. So in your independence, do you feel like you can get the best of both worlds? Can you be an analyst with your own voice?
I believe that for sure. And as a matter of fact, gives you an advantage over a big firm analyst, right? Because their voice gets hidden. They don't get necessarily the support or the ability to put themselves out there. I reached out to interview several analysts at big firms for Curmudgeon, And they said, sorry, we're not allowed to do that, right? We can't do behind the curtains kind of interviews. Even getting a quote from a Gartner analyst requires going through multiple layers of quote request people. But as an independent, man, you can, I'm waiting for a call from CNBC right now because they need somebody to talk about some new malware that's running around. And so I do all that myself, right? And you can find people to help you and lead things your way. So you're just making the decisions, not doing all the work. But it is quite a lot of freedom.
Excellent. So we certainly are living in interesting times, I think.
Yes, we are. Especially, so I think you noticed that I went back and got a degree in essentially international relations or history, the history of warfare, actually, which fed another interest of mine, which is military history. Right, a lot of us are military history buffs in the security industry. Right, now we'll all bump up to each other, quoting Sun Tzu and all the rest. And by the way, Marcus Ranum, who's well known to a lot of people, is a massive military history buff. And of course, he's smarter than anybody else on the planet. So when he gets talking about military history, you listen up because it's so cool.
He's amazing to so I think, gosh, it could have been a whole hour. I was just sitting, I walked by and I saw, oh, it's Marcus Ranum. He's talking to people. I sat there, probably stood for about a whole hour where he was talking about just various fighter jets and the evolution of them and how this one's junk and that one. And then he weaved history into this discussion of fighter jets. And it's you and he are my two favorite cyber war discussion folks. So I'm very, very interested in hearing some of your take on cyber war. How about in particular this weird mixture we got today of cyber warfare and propaganda? We're mixing our psyops with our cyber warfare. What can you tell me about that we're seeing so much of recently?
I can tell you I'm finally willing to say that something has taken me out of my depth. Because I know, when you see Bruce Schneier all of a sudden talking about airport security, you realize he's way outside his lane, right? I'll listen to
some notoriety out of it at least. But.
Yeah. I'll take advice from a police officer who knows something about physical security before I listen to a cyber guy talk about anything other than cyber, right? And so I was engaged by my publisher to rewrite my first book, Surviving Cyber War, which is, uses all the exact same stories as There Is No Cyber War by Thomas Rid, who's was a professor at King's College. Now he's at Johns Hopkins. Richard Clark's book on cyber war. So there's 4 books all came out. We all use the exact same stories, right? So Estonia, Georgia, and on from there. And we all came to totally different conclusions. Anyways, mine ended and took us up to 2010. And the publisher said, hey, let's come out with a second edition. And that was 3 years ago. And what was holding me back was, after 2016, a book on cyber warfare had to include the 2016 elections and Cambridge Analytica, and the elections in Indonesia and Africa that were all swung by data analytics people, right? Marketing, messaging people got to do that. And it was just too much. I couldn't grasp it all and do the research and pull it together. Thomas Rid was writing a book on basically influence operations, propaganda that took us way back in history. I would have had to read that book and then figure out how it tied into everything else and then write the update. So for once in my life, I finally had to give up on a project and say, I'm sorry, I can't write this book. I'm too busy. So
are you taking any of that? There had to be pieces of it that you did complete. Is there going to be any director's cuts coming out, or is that finding its way in any other publications?
Yeah, I'll go to my usual outlets. So I write the cyber domain at Forbes, which is a great place to get out there, but I feel really sorry for my readers because Forbes is one of the worst culprits when it comes to filling up the page with things that move, right? You cannot sit there and read an article. So I'm kind of getting upset, except that every time I publish there, a bunch of people say they read it and engage with me. If I post it on my own blog or on LinkedIn, much less so. So I'm thinking of just giving in and moving to Medium, because I'll acknowledge it's a pain that you have to pay $5 a month for it. But that's worth it if you're not reading ads. So maybe I can add some technical, more technical writing like I do, because I write a lot about government policy and laws and what the federal government should be doing, and I critique them quite a bit and all the stupid things that they do. And that would be a different thing for Medium.
So I read this article of yours on Forbes, and it was about the EU attempting to form an alternative to the US and Chinese cloud platforms. They're calling it Gaia X, I believe.
Right.
Your take was that it will be a failure on so many fronts.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. Regardless of one's trust in any given government today, I think it does seem even more odd to put your trust in the government of 8 years from now. So
right.
What do you think it would take for the EU to succeed as a government cloud security provider?
The EU would just have to shift to be a hotbed of technology innovation. That's all they got to do, and it's never going to happen, right? It's way too late for the EU, right? If there were some super innovative stuff going on, the government of the country where it was going on would have to shield it from EU regulation until it got big enough. Most successful EU technology startups immediately move to the US because they know they can just grow and everything else there. I worked with a really cool technology company startup during the .com days in Paris. And he explained to me the burden they were under, because there are employment police that monitor parking lots to make sure that the engineers aren't working late. And then they would find the employer if they were working late. And that
sounds like a fantasy land.
Yeah, I know. That ain't gonna cut it in Silicon Valley, right? Because most of us in technology work ridiculous hours. So yeah, I know. But that's just one example. So how in the world? And now they've set a budget for this new project. I just saw this 2 days ago. $10 billion, what they're going to invest in it. And mind you, if you're going up against a highly regulated company like Boeing, then you can create Airbus, right? And it'll have both will be on an even footing, right? Because they have to struggle with regulations. But even now, if you tried to start if you were Amazon going, hey, we've got a lot of IT systems. I wonder if we can, modularize it all so that we can do the same thing every time without wasting effort. And then let's sell that to people. You couldn't get off the ground with that in Europe right now, right? It's like, it's too late. They already know what you're doing. So they're going to start with the regulations. Okay, you can do that, but your data has got to be sequestered here. If you use encryption keys, law enforcement's going to need to get access to that someday. So you got to escrow the keys over here. Nobody's going to trust it. And it seems a little transparent what the governments in Europe are doing, right? Because this is a backlash to the NSA spying on everybody's data around the world, here at home, just capturing everything. And EU was totally affronted by that, rightfully so. And that started pushing, we're going to have the right to erasure. We're going to make Google take our search results off if we don't like them, and on and on and on. But in the meantime, they're all thinking, wow, the police forces and intelligence agencies are thinking, wow, what a great idea. We should get all the data in our country. And then we know where everybody is all the time. We know what they're thinking. We know what they're doing online. And we can have, true law enforcement that it'll be efficient. So, which is certainly what the NSA intended to do, right? They weren't doing it evilly. I know General Hayden well, and, I believe him when he says they had good intentions, right? They're making up for their failures on 9/11. And this was the best way they could think to do that. And Keith Alexander put it all together for them. But, they didn't think how awful this would be in the wrong hands. And that's exactly where we're going.
It does seem interesting that the EU is the source of GDPR, right? And if your concern is privacy, oh, heck, we got a solution for you. We're the GDPR people. You can trust us. It sounds like that might be a market niche for them, right?
Yeah. And you just look at the carve outs in GDPR, right? For prison records, totally okay to do whatever you want with those. Healthcare, mostly okay. Law enforcement, they don't have to do any GDPR stuff, right? It's just those other guys that are making money off your data.
Interesting. So what we talk a lot about a lot of different fields. What profession other than your own that you haven't already tried would you like to attempt?
Well, would it be okay to say make the shift to fiction writing?
Have you tried it?
Yeah. I've written 30,000 words, and I don't know if it's any good or not, but I like it. So, but that's starting on a whole new career, right? Just from ground zero, because I bet the intersection of people interested in cyber stuff and people interested in the fiction I want to write, very, very small intersection, right? Probably 10 people. Though my daughter pointed out to me when I was telling her the strange feeling I had when I sat down one morning to actually write fiction, and I was overcome with this, it was almost a sense of guilt, right? I was doing something and focusing on my mind and writing, and it wasn't working, right? I wasn't writing that white paper. I wasn't writing a post. I wasn't working on a book on cyber issues. It was something that had very, very small chance of ever seeing the light of day. And she says, yeah, Dad, but the market for fantasy science fiction is probably several thousand times bigger than the market for cyber warfare books. I thought that was pretty wise. So it made me feel better about it.
There you go. It's a bigger pond at the very least, right?
Exactly.
Well, if it's anywhere near as fascinating as the conversation we've had today, I know I'm going to be right there to
right,
get that book whenever you put it out there. So
you can be an advanced reader.
Please.
All right.
Please. So we've got we're bearing down on time now. I've had a great time asking all sorts of questions here, but we have some fantastic questions here on the line, it looks like. And Kathy Jolie Malik from our board is here to help navigate us through a few more of those questions. Again, thank you, Richard, for your time. It was an honor. And I put you in the very capable hands of Kathy.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, from one aerospace engineer to another.
All right.
No darn kidding.
Cool.
Well, it's an honor to represent our attendees with their questions. And Boris is one of our board members and asks a few. I'm happy to share. And then I'll look, there are quite a few others in our chat session as well. So first off, what are the major obstacles and accelerators that you see to cloud adoption?
Major obstacle is company culture, in the management all the way up to the board, the CEO, and then in the people doing the work, the IT people, the developers, all the rest. So the obstacle is, oh my God, cloud's not secure, cloud's expensive, look at these bills we get from AWS, all of that. The major accelerator was COVID-19. No question. I've talked to so many people who said, yeah, we had all these plans for getting people online from home. And that was about 5 years out, and we did it in 2 weeks. So and there's no going back, right? People actually like working from home. They hate their VPNs. They always have. And now they're going to be able to work from anywhere they want. And they're going to discover, once we're allowed to travel, that they can go nice places like your background and work from there. And it's going to be a whole new world.
to do it fast.
You said
How will IAM and IDAM and PAM change in the age of hybrid and multi-vendor cloud?
great question. It's already changing. It's phenomenal what I see going on. And I forgot to say something back when Mike was talking about Gartner's SASE. They can't, Gartner kind of just assumed there's this service edge out there, but they didn't really get around to defining it very well.
Mm.
And so I've been asking around, and there are actually multiple service edges, depending on, what your perspective is. So if you ask a hosting provider, then the service edge is, their routers and firewalls in their data center. If you ask one of these SASE providers, they says, oh, it's all the data centers around the world that we maintain our equipment in the cages. That's the service edge. It's first hop before you get to the cloud. If you ask a telecom company, well, the service edge is their central office. That's where they, terminate cell phone calls. That's where they do their routing and optimization and billing for minutes and all the rest. That's their edge. But if you talk to a pole man or an IoT person, the service edge is the top of the pole where they're going to put all this edge computing devices to do something. I haven't figured that out yet because I haven't seen any examples. So all that, to have all those abstractions, no matter how you're going to use them, the best abstraction is getting away from thinking of the physical network and thinking about the applications people need to get to, or the computing resources, and the people, and forget their devices, forget anything else. It's people in that. And the way you do that is with good identity management. And you get all the rest of it for free when you do that, right? Right now we've got privileged access management because there's servers with root passwords that everybody needs. So we need a proxy in the middle that's going to change those regularly, and then, check them out to you basically, and maybe monitor what you're doing when you're on it. You get that automatically with what do we call it? Cloud access, application access. So IAM is at the core of it, having a complete and as close to perfect directory with all the authorizations and the tie-ins for the authentication solutions that can authorize this granular access to all these applications. It's a totally different world. I would hate to be in that business if I weren't Okta. Ping has got a good shot at doing that pivot, so they look more and more like Okta every day. I just talked to another vendor under NDA today, but in another month or so, they're going to announce their all-encompassing IAM solution. It just blows me away. It's like, this is exactly how you do it.
Making progress. And on the topic of zero trust, what do you think about zero trust?
Yeah, so I'm all for the concept of, I used to call it looking for, and this is hard for me to, the word is hard to say, looking for trust interstices. So, we build all these separate systems and we harden them as much as we can. And then we grant privileged access to the DBA to them because we're going to trust that person because that person has a contract with us, an employment contract. And if they steal all of our data, we're going to fire them and maybe prosecute them. That's the trust interstice, right? We don't have any controls over that person. So you look for all of those in your organization. When I was a penetration tester, this is exactly what I did back in the day. I'd find all these places where the only protection was trusting somebody to do the right thing. And you slam that door shut, because even if the person you're trusting betrays that trust, or even if they don't, the bad guys are going to get their access credentials and they're going to come in. So you've got to be able to stop them in their tracks. So that sense of zero trust, totally on board with. The SASE model for doing it, I think, is great, right? You got basically a central proxy that's spread all over the world, and you authenticate once to it, and then you can get access to your networks and internet resources you need. The interesting thing is the other part of it, the one where you authenticate once and get access to your your private applications, you let your partners do that, all that good stuff. It sounds like it's zero trust in the beginning, but then most of the vendors have realized they have to also monitor your activity, and they have to ratchet up the, throttle you down or ratchet up the impediments to you stealing data. That's not zero trust. That's augmented trust, right?
Right.
We're going to change the trust levels. And they even say they have a scoring system. This guy's 100% trusted, and this guy's only 50% trusted because he's dialing in from China. That's not zero trust. That's, graduated trust.
So what do you think the ramp looks like for sort of the adoption in this particular space?
This is where I've got a big blind spot, because all I do is talk to people who are, doing the cool stuff, right? Either the vendors or the, early adapters. So I always underestimate how long it'll take to ramp up completely. I feel that the world will be a completely different place in 5 years at the outside. But that said, 5 years from now, there's still going to be some huge enterprises, running trains and rail systems and banks that still use mainframes and still have data centers with man traps in them. They're still going to be out there forever, just like practically every technology we've ever used still exists somewhere. I'm sure there's a hosting service for PDP-11 somewhere.
Transition's hard.
Yeah. And people don't transition unless they're forced to. So COVID was a great forcing function. Breaches are the other big forcing function, right? People don't hire their first CISO until after the company's name is in the papers. And they don't, it goes all the way down to individuals, right? They don't enable on Twitter and Facebook and Gmail the phone PIN authentication until after they've been hacked, and after they've had to tell all their friends that they've been hacked. And all their friends say, you really should just click here and add security to that. And that's just how they learn, no matter how often we all tell them to do it.
Well, I'm delighted to say we have far more questions than we have time. And Mr. Stiennon, for our attendees, was gracious to offer to answer the additional questions after the event. But as I'd like to ask one more question, taking us completely different, like almost a related tangent, speaking about forcing functions. There's a lot of talk around the world about digital currency and the role in central banks. And interestingly, you dropped the comment earlier about blockchain. Yep. So of course I had to sort of come back and say, well, I know it's early, but what do you think of this reality as a potential forcing function? And would you like to expand on your comment about blockchain?
Sure. Yeah. So so far I've identified 3 use cases for blockchain. And of course, digital currencies is the best one, right? That's what it was invented for, or handed down to us by some blockchain gods. We don't know. The other is voting. I think totally it's perfect, right? Completely transparent, as long as you're okay with everybody knowing who you voted for, but we could figure that out too. And completely verifiable, probably couldn't be cheated. And the other is lotteries, which is my big idea. I said, this is fantastic. I'm going to sell for $1 worth of Bitcoin. I'll sell a ticket, and everybody can see that, yes, the winner did have the winning numbers and had bought the ticket and got the payout. So it's a completely transparent lottery system. So right now we do trust our state governments to actually follow through, right? There's very little suspicion that their friends are winning and you're not. But you can do that. So I had that brilliant idea. So I went to just Google to see if anybody had done it. There's hundreds who have done it. A lot of people are doing it. So those 3 use cases do not include identity and access management, authorization, authentication, all the rest of that stuff. So financial cryptography, we used to call it, and it used to rely on PKI to get done, was one of the things that got me into security in the first place. That's what I was doing at PwC, and I was working on the e-check protocol, all these great things that use an underlying basis of cryptography and key management to accomplish. And they said, nah, we're just going to use this other thing called ACH. So that's what they do today, which is just a clearinghouse, which, by the way, is probably not very secure. So the government just goes to the lowest common denominator, cheapest way to get it done now, or the banks in this case. But it is a huge opportunity for somebody to, start putting their imprimatur on a digital currency. And that would be something that Bitcoin doesn't have that big of a turnover. What do they call that? Acceleration, whatever. But if the US government said, yeah, this coin base here is backed by US dollars, then it'd be pretty cool. We'd see something pretty neat. I even had the idea, hey, instead of charging income tax, why don't you literally charge a transaction tax on every single transaction done with this new Bitcoin? Didn't seem to work. You would have to charge about a 30% transaction rate to pay for the current federal budget. So,
well, there's so much more to talk about, Mr. Stiennon. We're grateful for you to join us today. And I see Rob Wilner has appeared, indicating that we're up against the clock.
Yeah. I want to thank Richard. I want to thank you for joining us this evening and sharing your wealth of information with everybody. And I do want to thank everybody for joining us, but please don't leave. I do have some closing reminders I do want to share with you. I want to thank everybody for attending, and please, we're going to have many more fireside chats moving forward. I do want to mention that we actually are scheduling one on Thursday, December 10th at 7:30 p.m. at our next Ask the Attorney at the Fireside Chat, and with our special guest, Jordan Fisher. I want to make sure that you read Richard Stiennon's newest release on paperback, The Curmudgeon, How to Succeed as an Industry Analyst, and I just posted it up on the Zoom webinar chat. So get that link and order. And order for the holidays, too, for your friends and family.
There we go.
Please, you're welcome. Please join. All right, we already did that. We are also planning an Ask the Cyber Insurance Guy at the Fireside Chat in January, and some important cloud security vendor webinar events as well. So stay tuned for those announcements as well. And as I mentioned earlier, I will send an email to every attendee and requesting your email address for those of you who haven't submitted, your mailing address, physical, so that Richard can send you a free copy of his book, Cyber Security Yearbook 2020, A History and Directory of the IT Security Industry. And there it is in living color. Richard, thank you so much. This was fabulous.
Thanks, Rob. That was fun.
It was. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Kathy. You did a wonderful job.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon.
Have a wonderful evening. Bye now.
Right.